Queen Zarathus sat alone in her massive throne room, watching the stars through the crystal dome above her head. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Zarian Prime, and still she could not sleep or eat properly. The palace servants whispered in the hallways about their queen, who had not smiled since the terrible news arrived. Princess Kiravel was dead, and her body was lost somewhere in enemy space. The throne room had always been Zarathus' favorite place in the palace. Golden walls reached up toward the ceiling where thousands of tiny lights sparkled like captured stars. These were the memory crystals of her ancestors, each one holding the consciousness of a dead ruler. For over 800 years the crystals had comforted her, but now they only reminded her of what was missing. Her daughter's crystal should have been among them, but Kiravel's body had never been found. According to Veltharian law and tradition, no royal could join the ancestors without the proper burial ceremony. The memory crystal had to be removed from the deceased and placed in the Hall of Stars during a special ritual. Without this ceremony, Kiravel's soul would wander forever in the dark spaces between worlds. The thought made Zarathus sick with worry and grief. Admiral Krexitar entered the throne room quietly. His heavy footsteps echoed on the polished floor as he approached his queen. Krexitar was old even by Veltharian standards and had served the royal family for over 2 centuries. His blue skin was marked with the scars of many battles, and his forearms moved with the practiced grace of a career soldier. "My queen," he said with a deep bow. "I bring news from the recovery missions." Zarathus did not turn to look at him. She continued staring up at the memory crystals of her ancestors. "More failure, I assume." "The 3rd mission has returned," Krexitar said carefully. "They were unable to penetrate the Korthak defensive line around Zarion Prime. We lost 2 ships and 30 good soldiers." The queen's hands gripped the arms of her throne until her knuckles turned white. 30 more deaths because of my daughter. Princess Kiravel died fighting for our people," Krexitar said firmly. "Her sacrifice saved thousands of lives when she led that final charge against the Korthak dreadnought. No one blames her for the war. I blame myself," Zarathus whispered. "I should have forbidden her from joining the battle. She was my only child and heir to the throne. Now our bloodline ends with me." Krexitar had heard these words many times over the past 3 months. The queen's guilt was eating her alive just as much as her grief. He wished he could find some way to comfort her, but what could anyone say to a mother who had lost her child? The great doors of the throne room opened with a soft sound. A palace guard entered and bowed low. "My queen, the human delegation requests an audience." Zarathus finally turned her head. "Humans? What do they want?" "They claim to have a proposal regarding the princess," the guard said nervously. Krexitar's forearms tensed. "Humans are barely civilized. They only achieved space travel 50 years ago. What could they possibly offer us that our advanced fleets cannot accomplish? Send them away." Zarathus said with a wave of her hand, "My queen." The guard continued. "Their ambassador specifically mentioned the recovery of Princess Kiravel's remains. She says they may be able to help where our forces have failed." For the first time in months, something other than grief flickered in the queen's eyes. It might have been curiosity or perhaps the faintest trace of hope. "Bring them in." A few minutes later, Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez entered the throne room followed by 3 other humans. They looked incredibly small compared to the massive Veltharian architecture around them. Lisa was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes. Behind her walked a younger man in military uniform, a female technician and an older male diplomat. The humans stopped at the appropriate distance and bowed respectfully. Lisa stepped forward and spoke in carefully pronounced Veltharian. "Your Majesty, I am Ambassador Rodriguez of the Terran Federation. We offer our deepest condolences for your loss." Zarathus studied the tiny creatures before her throne. Humans were strange beings with their pale skin and small size. They had no natural weapons or armor like the Korthak. They possessed no advanced technology like the Veltharians. Their ships were primitive and their weapons were simple. What could they possibly do that her mighty empire could not? "You wish to discuss my daughter?" the queen said in perfect English. Lisa nodded. "We understand that 3 recovery missions have failed to retrieve Princess Kiravel's remains. We believe we might be able to succeed where others have not." Krexitar stepped forward angrily. "How dare you suggest that primitive humans could accomplish what the finest Veltharian warriors could not? Our ships are faster, our weapons are more powerful, our soldiers are better trained." The human soldier behind Lisa also stepped forward. His name was Jake Carter, and though he was young, his eyes held the look of someone who had seen combat. Admiral, sometimes being smaller and less advanced can be an advantage. Our ships don't show up on sensors the way yours do. We can slip through defenses that would detect your vessels from light years away. Zarathus leaned forward slightly. There was something in this human's voice that reminded her of Kiravel. The same determination and refusal to accept defeat. You would risk your lives for someone you never met? Jake's expression softened. Your Majesty, I lost my sister in a border conflict 5 years ago. I never got to say goodbye or give her a proper burial. No parent should have to live with that kind of emptiness. If there's even a small chance we can bring your daughter home, we have to try. The throne room fell silent. Even Krextar stopped his protest as he saw something he had not witnessed in months. Queen Zarathus was crying, but for the first time since the news of Kiravel's death, these were not tears of despair. They were tears of hope. Tell me your plan, she said quietly. Jake Carter stood before Queen Zarathus in a private chamber deep within the palace. The room was smaller than the throne room, but somehow felt more personal with its soft lighting and comfortable furniture. Lisa Rodriguez sat nearby while Admiral Krextar watched from the corner with obvious suspicion. Jake had spent the last 2 hours explaining his plan and answering the Queen's careful questions. Let me understand this correctly, the Queen said slowly. You believe that because your ships are primitive, the Korthak sensors will not detect them. That's right, Your Majesty, Jake replied. Our technology is so basic compared to yours that we barely register on advanced detection systems. It's like trying to spot a wooden canoe when you're looking for battleships. Krextar made a dismissive sound. Even if your ship could somehow reach Zirion Prime undetected, the moon where the princess died is crawling with Korthak patrols. How would you possibly extract her remains and escape? Jake had been thinking about this problem for weeks. Admiral, your people fight with honor. You announce your presence, you engage in direct combat, you follow the rules of war. The Korthak respect that even as they try to kill you. But humans don't always fight that way. We use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, misdirection. We'll make them think we're somewhere else while we do the real work. Queen Zarathus looked at Jake with growing interest. She had studied human military history since their delegation arrived and had been surprised by their resourcefulness. Humans seemed to have a talent for winning battles they should have lost by using unexpected methods. There is another problem, the Queen said quietly. Even if you could reach my daughter's remains, you would need to understand our burial customs. Princess Kiravel cannot simply be returned in any condition. There are specific requirements for the ceremony. Lisa Rodriguez spoke up. Your Majesty, I've been studying Veltharian traditions for the past month. I understand that the princess must be returned with her memory crystal intact. The bioneural implant in her crown contains her consciousness patterns and must be properly extracted for the ritual of eternal joining. The Queen nodded approvingly. Most species do not bother to learn such details about our culture. I am impressed that you have taken the time to understand what is truly important. Your daughter matters to you, Jake said simply. That makes her matter to us. These words hit the Queen harder than any formal condolence. She had received hundreds of messages from allied species expressing sympathy for her loss, but this human spoke with genuine empathy rather than diplomatic politeness. She could see in his eyes that he really did understand her pain. Tell me about your sister, she asked quietly. Jake's expression grew distant. Kelly was 2 years younger than me. She joined the Colonial Marines to protect our outer settlements from raiders. I was supposed to be on the same mission, but I got sick with some bug and had to stay behind. Her unit walked into an ambush and she died trying to save her squad mates. I never got to say goodbye or thank her for always looking out for me when we were kids. And you think rescuing my daughter will somehow heal that wound? The Queen asked. No, Your Majesty. Jake replied honestly. Nothing will bring Kelly back or make that pain go away. But maybe I can spare you from living with the same regret I carry every day. Maybe I can give you the closure I never had. Queen Zarathus was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she turned to Admiral Krextar. What intelligence do we have about the crash site? Krextar reluctantly activated a holographic display showing the Zirion system. Princess Kiravel's ship went down on Zirion 7, the largest moon of the gas giant. The crash site is approximately 40 kilometers from a major Korthak mining installation. Our reconnaissance suggests they are using the area for weapons testing, which explains why our previous missions encountered such heavy resistance. Jake studied the display carefully. How big are the Korthak patrol groups? Usually 20 to 30 soldiers with heavy weapons and armor. Krexter answered, they patrol in regular patterns every 6 hours. That's actually good news. Jake said, regular patterns mean predictable behavior. We can work around that. The Queen looked skeptical. You truly believe 5 humans can succeed where 90 Veltharian soldiers failed? Different doesn't mean better or worse, Your Majesty. Jake explained. A scalpel can cut things that a hammer cannot touch. Sometimes you need precision instead of power, Lisa Rodriguez added. Your Majesty, we're not asking you to risk any more Veltharian lives. This would be an entirely human operation using our own resources. If we fail, you've lost nothing except the time spent talking to us. And if you succeed, the Queen asked, then your daughter comes home. Jake said simply. Queen Zarathus stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. In the distance, she could see the memorial grove where statues honored fallen heroes. A new statue of Princess Kiravel stood among them, but it felt incomplete without the princesses. Actual remains buried beneath it. Admiral Krextar, she said without turning around, provide these humans with all the intelligence they require. Ship movements, patrol schedules, terrain maps, everything. My queen, Krextar protested. Surely you cannot be serious about this. I am completely serious, she replied. Mr. Carter, you have 24 hours to assemble your team and prepare your ship. I will not wait longer than that. Jake felt a surge of excitement mixed with terror. He had hoped the Queen would agree, but now that she had, the reality of what he was promising hit him hard. Thank you, Your Majesty. We won't let you down. See that you don't, the Queen said, turning to face him again. Because if you fail and die in the attempt, I will have lost not only my daughter, but also the brave souls who tried to bring her home. I could not bear that additional guilt. As the humans left the private chamber, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had made a promise to a grieving mother, and now he had to figure out how to keep it. The next 24 hours would determine whether he was about to become a hero or add his name to the list of casualties in this war. But as he thought about Princess Kiravel lying alone on that distant moon and Queen Zarathus crying in her empty palace, Jake knew he had to try. Some things were worth risking everything for. The human ship Endurance drifted silently through the asteroid field at the edge of Korthak space. Jake Carter sat in the pilot's seat staring at the sensor display that showed dozens of enemy patrol ships moving in regular patterns. 2 weeks had passed since they left Veltharian space, and every day brought them deeper into hostile territory. Readings look good, Tony Mitchell said from the engineering station. Our emissions are so low that we're practically invisible to their sensors. Jake nodded but kept his eyes on the patrol routes. The Korthak were efficient and predictable, which made them dangerous in open battle but easier to avoid if you were patient and careful. How much longer until we reach the extraction window? 6 hours, replied Beth Turner from the navigation console. The next gap in their patrol schedule will give us exactly 43 minutes to get in and out. Dr. Carol Barnes looked up from her medical equipment. That's not much time to locate the princess and extract her memory crystal. It'll have to be enough, Jake said. We can't risk staying longer. Ryan Chang had been monitoring Korthak communications for days and finally spoke up. Their chatter suggests they've been strip mining Xerion 7 for rare metals. They're using the princess's crash site as a weapons testing range, which explains why the Veltharian recovery missions ran into so much trouble. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had been hoping the crash site would be relatively unguarded, but it sounded like they were flying into the middle of a military base. Any good news? Actually, yes, Ryan continued. They're rotating their testing schedule. During the extraction window, that sector should be mostly empty, except for a skeleton guard force. Tony Mitchell finished his final checks on their equipment. The team carried a mixture of human and Veltharian technology, including a portable bioscanner that could locate the princess's remains and a specialized extraction tool for removing memory crystals safely. Everything was packed into lightweight cases that could be carried quickly across rough terrain. Remember the plan, Jake said as they approached the final jump point. We land in the northern canyon, move overland to the crash site, extract what we need and get back to the ship. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We're here for one reason only. The team acknowledged their orders, but Jake could see the tension in their faces. They all knew this mission could go wrong in 100 different ways. The Korthak were brutal fighters who showed no mercy to prisoners. If they were caught, death would be the kindest outcome they could hope for. Endurance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zerian system. Immediately, their passive sensors picked up dozens of Korthak ships patrolling the area. Jake guided their small vessel through the sensor shadows cast by the gas giants' moons, using gravitational fields to mask their approach. It was delicate work that required perfect timing and a lot of luck. "Contact," Beth whispered urgently. "Korthak destroyer bearing 27 Mark IV. Jake cut their engines and let the ship drift behind a large asteroid. Through the viewports, they could see the massive enemy warship passing less than 1,000 kilometers away. Its dark hull bristled with weapons, and its sensors swept space continuously looking for intruders. For several long minutes, the humans held their breath and waited. Finally, the destroyer moved away and Jake restarted their engines. That was too close. "Welcome to Korthak space," Tony muttered. They reached Zerian 7 without further incident, and Jake brought the ship down in a narrow canyon that would hide them from orbital scans. The moon's surface was rocky and barren, with a thin atmosphere that required breathing masks but was otherwise hospitable. In the distance, they could see the glow of Korthak mining operations and the occasional flash of weapons testing. The team gathered their equipment and began the trek toward the crash site. Jake led the way using a handheld scanner to navigate, while the others followed in single file. The terrain was treacherous with loose rocks and hidden crevices, but they made good time despite the difficulties. After 2 hours of hiking, they reached a ridge overlooking the crash site. Jake raised his binoculars and surveyed the scene below. Princess Kiravel's ship had hit the canyon floor with tremendous force, scattering debris across several square kilometers. The main hull section was partially buried under rockfall, but still recognizable as a Veltharian cruiser. There, Dr. Barnes pointed to a section of twisted metal. "That looks like the command module where the princess would have been during the battle." Jake studied the wreckage through his binoculars. He could see scorch marks from energy weapons and impact craters from the crash itself. It was a miracle that anything had survived the violence of that final battle. "I don't see any guards." "They're there," Ryan said quietly. "Korthak soldiers don't leave valuable salvage unprotected. They're probably camouflaged or hidden in the rocks." The team spent another hour observing the site and planning their approach. Finally, Jake made his decision. "Tony and Beth stay here with the heavy equipment. Ryan provides overwatch from that rock formation. Carol and I go down to extract the princess." The descent into the canyon took 20 minutes of careful climbing. Jake and Dr. Barnes moved slowly to avoid dislodging rocks that might alert hidden sentries. When they reached the wreckage, Jake was amazed by the size of the destruction. The princess's ship had been nearly 200 meters long but now existed only as scattered fragments. Dr. Barnes activated her bioscanner and began searching for organic remains. The device beeped softly as it detected traces of Veltharian DNA scattered throughout the debris field. "The readings are very faint, but there's definitely something here." They worked their way through the wreckage methodically, checking each section where the scanner indicated possible remains. Jake found pieces of armor and personal effects, but nothing substantial enough for a burial ceremony. He was beginning to worry that they had come all this way for nothing when Dr. Barnes called out softly. "Over here," she whispered urgently. "I found her." Jake rushed to where Dr. Barnes was kneeling beside a section of collapsed bulkhead. Underneath the twisted metal lay the preserved remains of Princess Kiravel, still wearing the ceremonial crown that contained her memory crystal. The princess looked peaceful despite the violence of her death, as if she were simply sleeping. "The memory crystal is intact," Dr. Barnes confirmed as she carefully extracted the bio-neural device. "We can complete the mission." That was when Jake heard the first energy blast. Energy blasts lit up the canyon as Korthak soldiers opened fire from concealed positions. Jake grabbed Dr. Barnes and pulled her behind a large piece of wreckage as plasma bolts sizzled through the air above their heads. The princess's memory crystal was safely secured in Barnes's equipment pack, but now they had to survive long enough to escape with it. Contact left. Ryan's voice crackled through their communications. "I count 12 hostiles moving down the north slope." Jake peered around the twisted metal and saw the enemy soldiers advancing with military precision. Korthak warriors were larger and stronger than humans with natural armor plating and powerful energy weapons. In a direct fight, the humans would be slaughtered in seconds. Tony, Beth, get back to the ship and prep for emergency departure. Jake ordered, "We'll meet you at the extraction point." Negative. Tony's voice came back immediately. "We don't leave anyone behind." More energy blasts struck their position, heating the metal around them until it glowed red. Dr. Barnes worked frantically to pack the princess's remains into a portable stasis field, while Jake returned fire with his rifle. The human weapons were less powerful than Korthak energy guns, but they were accurate and reliable. Ryan Chang had positioned himself on a rocky outcrop overlooking the battle. His sniper rifle picked off 2 Korthak soldiers before the others figured out where the shots were coming from. When they turned their attention to his position, Ryan was already moving to a new location using techniques learned from human guerrilla warfare. The battle continued for 20 minutes with the humans using mobility and terrain to their advantage. They never stayed in one place long enough for the Korthak to pin them down, and they coordinated their movements to create confusion about their actual numbers. The enemy soldiers grew frustrated, trying to fight opponents who refused to engage in honorable direct combat. Jake and Dr. Barnes finally managed to reach the canyon wall where a narrow trail led back toward their ship. The stasis field containing Princess Kiravel's remains was heavy but portable, and Barnes had successfully extracted several DNA samples along with the memory crystal. "We need to move now," Jake said as another volley of energy blasts struck the rocks around them. They began climbing the steep trail with Dr. Barnes carrying the precious cargo, while Jake provided covering fire. Behind them, they could hear Korthak soldiers shouting orders in their harsh language as they organized a pursuit. The humans had maybe a 10-minute head start before the enemy reached the top of the canyon. Halfway up the trail, Tony Mitchell appeared above them carrying a heavy pack of explosives. "I rigged charges along the trail," he said breathlessly. "Should slow them down." The first explosion came just as the lead Korthak soldiers reached the base of the cliff. Tons of rock cascaded down into the canyon, blocking the main route and forcing the enemy to find another way up. But Jake knew it would only buy them a few minutes at most. When they reached the top of the canyon, Beth Turner was waiting with grim news. "The ship's engines are damaged," she reported. "Something must have hit us during the fighting. We can fly but not very far or very fast." Jake felt his heart sink. Their escape route was compromised and they were stranded deep in enemy territory with hostile forces closing in from all directions. "How long for repairs?" "At least 4 hours." Beth said, "Maybe longer without proper parts." "We don't have 4 hours," Jake replied as more explosions echoed from the canyon below. "The Korthak will have reinforcements here within the hour." Tony Mitchell was already unpacking his equipment. "I can jury-rig something to get us mobile, but it won't be pretty." Dr. Barnes checked the stasis field containing Princess Kiravel's remains. "The field is stable, but it won't last more than 6 hours without recharging." Ryan Chang had set up an observation post to monitor enemy movements. "Multiple contacts approaching from the east," he reported. "Looks like a full company with heavy weapons." Jake made a difficult decision. "We can't wait for repairs. We'll have to go overland to the backup extraction point." The backup plan called for reaching a second landing zone 15 kilometers away where they could signal for help. It meant crossing open terrain while carrying the princess's remains and fighting off Korthak patrols. But it was their only chance. The team gathered their essential equipment and began the dangerous journey across Sirian 7's rocky surface. Dr. Barnes carried the stasis field while the others formed a protective escort around her. Behind them, they could see smoke rising from their abandoned ship as Korthak forces reached the landing site. For 3 hours they moved through broken terrain, avoiding main routes and using natural cover to stay hidden. The Korthak were persistent hunters with advanced tracking equipment, but they seemed confused by human tactical methods. Every time the enemy thought they had cornered their prey, the humans were already somewhere else. As night fell on the alien moon, the team took shelter in a cave system to rest and plan their next move. Tony Mitchell had been growing weaker throughout the journey, and Dr. Barnes discovered that he had been hit by weapons fire during the canyon battle. "It's not fatal," Barnes said quietly, "but he's losing blood and needs medical attention." Tony tried to stand but collapsed back against the cave wall. "I'm slowing you down," he said through gritted teeth. Leave me here with a radio and some explosives. I can create diversions while you reach the extraction point. Absolutely not, Jake said firmly. We all go home together. Jake, Tony said seriously, the princess is more important than one human life. Her mother is waiting for her to come home. Don't let my injury stop you from completing the mission. Dr. Barnes worked on Tony's wounds while Jake struggled with an impossible choice. Every minute they delayed meant more time for the Korthak to find them. But the idea of abandoning a team member went against everything he believed in. That was when Ryan's voice came through their communicator with the best news they had heard all day. Contact bearing north-northwest, he said excitedly. It's not Korthak. I'm seeing Veltharian ship signatures. Jake grabbed his binoculars and climbed to the cave entrance. In the distance, he could see the distinctive blue glow of Veltharian engines as several ships descended through the atmosphere. Someone had come to rescue them. But whether they would arrive in time remained to be seen. Admiral Krextar's rescue ships landed near the cave just as Korthak reinforcements arrived in the area. The battle that followed was brief but intense, as Veltharian soldiers used their superior firepower to drive off the enemy forces. Jake watched from the cave entrance as elegant alien fighters danced through the sky, their weapons painting deadly patterns against the stars. When the shooting stopped, Krextar himself entered the cave to check on the human team. His forearms moved quickly as he examined Tony Mitchell's wounds and called for medical assistance. Your friend will live, he told Jake. But he needs immediate treatment aboard our medical ship. Dr. Barnes carefully handed over the stasis field containing Princess Kiravel's remains. The memory crystal is intact and ready for the burial ceremony, she said quietly. Krextar accepted the precious cargo with reverence that surprised the humans. You have accomplished what 3 Veltharian expeditions could not, he said. My queen will want to thank you personally. The journey back to Veltharian space took 5 days aboard Krextar's flagship. The humans were given comfortable quarters and excellent medical care while Tony recovered from his injuries. Jake spent most of the trip staring out at the stars and thinking about Princess Kiravel, lying in state in the ship's ceremonial chamber. Queen Zarathes was waiting at the spaceport when they arrived. She stood alone on the landing platform wearing formal robes of deep blue silk that shimmered in the afternoon light. For the first time since Jake had met her, the Queen's eyes held something other than grief. There was sadness still, but also gratitude and a kind of peace. Jake carried the stasis field down the ship's ramp and placed it gently at the Queen's feet. Your Majesty, he said simply, your daughter is home. Zarathes knelt beside the field and placed her hands on the transparent surface. Through the stasis barrier, she could see Kiravel's peaceful face exactly as it had been in life. She looks like she's sleeping, the Queen whispered. Dr. Barnes extracted the memory crystal safely. Jake continued, everything is ready for the burial ceremony. The Queen stood and looked at each member of the human team. You risked your lives for someone you never met, she said. Why, Jake thought about his answer carefully. Your Majesty, every parent deserves the chance to say goodbye to their child. Every daughter deserves to come home to her mother. Some things are more important than politics or species differences. Queen Zarathes nodded slowly. Admiral Krextar tells me you refused to abandon your wounded comrade even when it put the mission at risk. We don't leave our people behind. Jake said, that's who we are. I am beginning to understand that. The Queen replied, tomorrow evening I will perform the ritual of eternal joining in the Temple of Ancestors. I would be honored if you and your team would attend as my guests. The next evening, Jake found himself standing in the most sacred place in the Veltharian Empire. The Temple of Ancestors was a massive crystal dome that rose from the center of the royal palace, like a frozen bubble of starlight. Inside, thousands of memory crystals created a symphony of soft colors and gentle music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Queen Zarathes stood at the center of the temple wearing ceremonial robes covered in symbols that told the story of her family's 1,000-year reign. In her hands, she held Princess Kiravel's memory crystal, which pulsed with a soft golden light in rhythm with her heartbeat. The ceremony began with ancient words spoken in the old language of Velthara. Jake didn't understand most of what was said, but he could feel the power and emotion behind each phrase. This was more than just a funeral. It was a celebration of life and a promise that love transcends death. As the ritual reached its climax, something extraordinary happened. Princess Kiravel's consciousness briefly manifested through the crystal matrix, appearing as a translucent figure standing beside her mother. The princess looked exactly as she had in life, young and proud and full of courage. "Mother," the princess said in a voice like distant music, "I am proud to be your daughter, and proud to call these humans friends." Kiravel turned to look at Jake and his team. "Thank you for bringing me home," she said. "You have shown that courage and compassion are not limited by species or technology. You have honored both your kind and mine." The manifestation lasted only a few seconds before fading away, but it left everyone in the temple changed. Queen Zarathus wept openly as her daughter's crystal took its place among the ancestors, adding its light to the eternal symphony. After the ceremony, the queen approached Jake privately. "My daughter spoke truly," she said. "You have shown me that humanity possesses qualities my empire has forgotten. We have become so focused on our advanced technology and ancient traditions that we forgot the simple power of doing what is right, Your Majesty," Jake began, but she held up her hand. "Tomorrow I will address the Galactic Council," she continued. "I will sponsor humanity's entry as a full member species. Any civilization capable of such selfless courage deserves recognition among the stars." Jake felt overwhelmed by the honor. "We just did what needed to be done." "Exactly." The queen smiled. "That is precisely why you deserve our respect." The formal ceremony took place 1 week later in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species watched as Queen Zarathus presented humanity with the Crystal of Eternal Courage, the highest honor in Veltharian culture. Jake accepted the award on behalf of all humans everywhere, but the real victory was smaller and more personal. That evening, Jake stood in the Palace Memorial Garden where a new monument honored both Veltharian and human heroes who had died in service to others. He placed a small earth rose beside Princess Kiravel's crystal marker, a gesture that symbolized the friendship between their two peoples. Queen Zarathus watched from her window as Jake completed this simple ritual. For the first time since her daughter's death, she was not alone with her grief. The humans had not only brought Kiravel home, but had also given the queen something precious: the knowledge that there were still beings in the galaxy who understood that love and honor matter more than power or technology. As Jake walked back toward the palace, he thought about his sister Kelly and how proud she would have been. He had finally found a way to honor her memory by helping another family find peace. Sometimes the greatest victories were measured not in battles won or enemies defeated, but in tears dried and hearts healed. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or superior technology, but through the simple recognition that every life has value, and every parent deserves to say goodbye to their child,